For the last year, ITV News has been investigating the damage that can be done to the brains of soldiers by the waves of pressure which are released when they are exposed to explosions. Recent research carried out by America's Department of War shows that there is a link between blast-related traumatic brain injury and increased rates of suicide among service personnel. Our research suggests there might be a similar connection in this country. Tonight we hear from war families mourning the loss of a veteran who took their own lives. They're calling on the authorities here to start diagnosing the condition and to do more to prevent it. And a warning that this report from Geraint Vincent contains details which you may find upsetting.
In America, much time and money has been spent studying the effects of war on those who fight it. There are disturbing findings in recent research. Veterans who live with traumatic brain injury, or TBI, are more likely to take their own lives.
In this particular population, 2.5 million post 9/11 veterans, there is a strong association between exposure to a TBI and having an increased suicide rate. So that there's a definite correlation there. Exactly why that's the case is still what we're trying to understand.
Up close to an explosion, soldiers' brains are shaken by the pressure wave. Repeated exposure to blasts, even those created when they fire their own weapons, can result in what's known as a blast-related traumatic brain injury. Ben Riches was an infantry soldier who served alongside his older brother, Stephen. He's on the left here, being interviewed on ITV's This Morning on operations in Iraq.
How's it going?
Good.
Yeah, not too scary.
No.
This is more scary doing an interview, is it?
Yeah.
In 2019, Ben took his own life. His parents are still wondering why. They suspect that traumatic brain injury played a part.
We knew straight away, immediately when he came home, he'd changed. That's when we noticed the problems. He started drinking at times heavily. His behaviour was changing. There was mood swings. We can always say what if, but if it was possible to look at Ben now and say, was it traumatic brain injury, I'd say yes, go and have a look at him. And I'd like to see coroners as part of the investigation considering and maybe saying to the families, look, we have this issue, would you consider a brain autopsy? We've got to find a way to put it right and prevent it.
There's too many of them. For it all to be PTSD, there's too many of them, isn't there?
Yes.
The research in America was based on data from medical and service records, which the authorities in the UK simply do not collect. The Ministry of Defence describes the long-term effects of blast exposure as only alleged. It doesn't know how many British veterans are living with traumatic brain injury, and it doesn't know how many of them have been driven to a point of such despair that they've taken their own lives.
In the absence of any relevant British data, we looked at press reports of the suicides of 34 serving soldiers and veterans, many of whom fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. All but 3 of them were routinely exposed to blasts as part of their training, and nearly half the group were exposed to at least one significant explosion while on active service. Even though they make up less than 10% of the armed forces as a whole, infantry soldiers were overrepresented here, making up 70% of our sample. Royal Engineers, Royal Marines and members of the Special Forces, all of them more likely to be exposed to blasts because of the nature of their role, were also overrepresented.
I know more people who have died by suicide that I've served with than have been killed in action.
Paul Scanlon spent most of his military service in the Australian Special Forces. He now campaigns for governments to take action on TBI. He's convinced that lethal damage was done to his comrades long before they reached the battlefield, and he cites another piece of American research which links suicides among service personnel to the kind of work they did in the military and how much they were exposed to blast.
Those in the highest risk groups, so infantry, armour, artillery, engineers, explosive ordnance disposal, divers, special forces, were up to 33 deaths per 100,000. So 3 times the civilian rate and double the standard military rate. Now, when I've gone to Australia to ask why aren't we collecting that, they're just simply not looking for it.
Paul's frustration is shared by grieving families here. Dawn Turner's son, Rob, served 2 tours of Afghanistan with the Royal Horse Artillery. He killed himself in August, having suffered many of the symptoms of brain injury.
He recognised it was a physical problem, and he told everybody it was a physical problem with his headaches, with his dizziness. But we all put it down to PTSD because that's what has been, that's the only information that's out there.
An inquest into Rob's death opens in the new year. Dawn hopes to ask the coroner to consider whether blast-related traumatic brain injury was a contributing factor.
Traumatic brain injury needs to be brought into the public domain. It needs to be recognised, and people need to be more aware of this could be happening to your loved one. And please, please go and get some support. Please speak out before it's too late.
We are still only beginning to understand the harm done inside the heads of those who serve, but we know now that there is a link between blast-shaken brains and suicide. There might be many lives that can still be saved.
Geraint, this is the first time that we looked at a possible link between TBI and suicides. So what's the government saying about it?
Well, they point us towards 2 big studies that they've done, both of which found that the suicide rate among veterans is broadly comparable to the suicide rate among the general civilian population. And the MOD has pointed out to us, entirely correctly, that suicide is complex, can be instigated by a range of factors, and just because there's a coincidence between a particular condition and a suicide rate doesn't mean that one causes the other. But I think what the families of the veterans that we've spoken to in that report, and the veterans that we've spoken to, we think that they are living right now with a blast-related TBI, they want recognition. And recognition that TBI is a thing and something that we should be doing something about. The MOD is spending money on more research into it, but in the United States, tens of thousands of service personnel have been diagnosed with it. They've changed their training procedures to limit exposure to blast and to limit the amount of time that soldiers spend on heavy weaponry. In the UK, they haven't changed training procedures, and being diagnosed with a blast-related TBI is a vanishingly rare occurrence.
OK, Geraint, thank you very much. Just to say, if you've been affected by the issues in our report, you can find the details of helplines and support groups on our website. That's itv.com/news.